Thank you for staying with us. It was a sad day on the 9th of January when bandits in Abuja kidnapped a father and his 6 daughters. After a short while, their father was released with a demand to get 60 million naira for the release of the daughters before the 12th of January. Now, after pleading on social media, they couldn't get the whole money, and one of his daughters was killed. The student's death sparked outrage on X, formerly Twitter, with many users calling on security agencies to intensify effort to rescue the remaining persons in captivity. And the ransom has now been increased to 100 million, with a death sentence on the remaining 5 girls. If the money is not paid, that's what they're saying. Now, joining us via Zoom is a security consultant and the managing director, Beacon Consulting Limited, Kabir Adamu. Kabir, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and good morning.
It's really a sad development, and our heart goes out to the family that is facing this matter as we speak. But in recent times, we have seen a number of kidnap cases in the Federal Capital Territory. And the question is, how did we get to this point? Kabir, can you hear me? Kabir, are you there, if you can hear me? The question is, how did we get to this point where we are witnessing this number of kidnappings in the Federal Capital Territory? All right, while we wait for Kabir, Ibrahim, it's quite concerning, the level of kidnappings we have witnessed, not just in the Federal Capital Territory, but in the country as a whole. But one would expect that the Federal Capital Territory will be a place that is safe, so to speak, because it is the capital. And but the reverse is the case.
Yeah, of course. I call it the Nigeria's headquarters. The government headquarters. It's just really, really sad. We're hearing this from the FCT. One of our colleagues, said on TV yesterday that, with all of this attendance, kidnapping, crime, criminalities, recorded in Abuja, we don't pray to wake up one day and we hear that, Aso Rock has been, attacked, by some of these marauders. It's very, very sad. And this is where we need the security agencies to be on top of their game. And the president is also looking to, I think I'll get this back.
Right. Kabir Adamu, can you hear me? Good morning once again.
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you now.
Right. I was asking, I mentioned earlier that our heart goes out to the family of this persons whose 5 daughters were kidnapped. Unfortunate incident. But the question is, how did we get to this point where we have been witnessing the incessant number of kidnappings in the Federal Capital Territory?
Thank you. And yes, it's really unfortunate. And we join millions of Nigerians who are, angry, who feel nervous, who are frightened by the current situation. The capital city of any country is a place where that country showcases its strength and where vulnerabilities such as kidnap for ransom have been allowed to reign in a capital city. It's not going to help our country in all ramifications. The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration's imperative for improving foreign direct investment and for diversifying the economy, unfortunately, will not be helped by this regard. In addition, the imperative to improve security will not be helped in this regard. Now, we got here because, unfortunately, the current effectiveness and efficiency of the security management system in place in Abuja has not been able to address the security challenges. Abuja is unique in the sense that it shares borders with at least 4 states that are security challenged: Kogi State, Nasarawa State, Kaduna State, and Niger State. Each of the states that I've mentioned are security challenged. They have a single common element, which is the activities of non-state armed groups. Now, these non-state armed groups are divided into different categories, but the 2 prominent ones that are important to our conversation are the so-called gunmen that we either call bandits or in certain parlances terrorists. The other ones are the criminal groups, who both of these 2 groups engage in kidnap for ransom, either because of the benefit it gives them, in this instance just to collect the money and use it for whatever they want to do, or in certain instances, especially for the terrorist groups, use it to finance their activities. Abuja, because of the fact that it houses, as it were, more prominent people, now makes it an attractive target for them. Now, the second factor is the presence of forested parts and mountainous areas in the border communities of Abuja. All of these 4 states that I've mentioned, in the adjoining communities to FCT Abuja, you have either mountains or forested parts. Now, there are routes within these mountains and forested parts that these 2 categories that I've mentioned are able to come into Abuja, carry out their incident attacks, targeting specific individuals, and then use those routes to, unfortunately, escape. And with all sense of responsibility, I haven't seen any effective measure that has been put in place by the security agencies to prevent the use of these mountainous or forested parts for these activities. We know that in the past, especially the immediate past administration in FCTA, has implemented what it called the G7 initiative, which is an initiative that combined at least 7 states, the 4 that I've mentioned, with I think Plateau State, and I'm not sure Benue State, in an attempt to have some form of surveillance and then carry out operations within these locations. But that has been stopped, and unfortunately where we are at the moment.
All right, Mr. Adamu, I'm not exactly sure how to start with you because I have so many questions rioting in my head, but I think I'm just going to start anyway. If you look at the other part of the country, where you have, marauders, you have the criminals, kidnappers attacking people, kidnapping people for ransom and all of that. You'd be wondering exactly what makes it so attractive for them to be doing so, because, just talk about the Al-Kadiryar Girls, they requested 50 million naira then to 1 million naira, and then we also read in the papers that some that have been kidnapped, they've raised the ransom to 700 million naira. The former minister Ali Pantami said that the failure to use NIN-SIM to track them, but some of these kidnappers make use of the phones of their victims and making it difficult for them to track. How do you see us using technology and the way we've even talked about it and how we've deployed it? And it appears like these people are getting stronger by the day.
In simple terms, the managers of our security sector, those who have responsibility, the coordinating elements within the security sector, they need to wake up from their slumber. I do not subscribe to the fact, and I say this with all sense of responsibility. I run a consultancy, and we support the release of abducted victims. I know for a fact that we have trackers, and I know for a fact that we usually, when I say we, I mean the security agencies, know the locations where these abductors are. Anyone who says the statement by Pantami perhaps is out, I'm sorry to use the word, out of ignorance. I know for a fact that the security agencies have the capacity to track, and they know usually in almost all the cases that I have been involved in, that I have supported, they know where these abductors are. The challenge for them usually is, the fact that they've already abducted these persons, and so if they attempt to rescue them, or an operation that would help in releasing them, then the likelihood is that there will be collateral damage. The persons may be killed, because the abduction style that we see in Nigeria is usually extremely organized. The groups sometimes divide themselves into as much as 4 different groups. The one that would be holding the victims will be different. In certain instances, they even divide the victims, if there are many, into groups. And they are holding them in difficult to access places. And so if you are tracking the ones that are holding them, it's not very necessary that the ones that are negotiating with the family members or loved ones, it's not necessary that you know where the other group that is holding the group are. So if you carry an operation and arrest the ones that are negotiating, the other ones have that opportunity to take certain action. So it's not that easy. And again, I want to buttress the fact that we have technology, and that technology usually, from my experience, allows us to know. The missing link is the tactical component within our security forces that would allow them to have incision-style operations that would go in, just like we saw the Americans did when they abducted their citizen somewhere in the border area between Niger and Nigeria. They carried out an incision, precision-style operation where a tactical team came in with precision style and were able to rescue the individual. And the element that allowed
Mr. Adamu, we can't hear you. If you can unmute yourself.
Now, with good intelligence, you'll be able to know where these 4 groups are. You'll be able to carry out perhaps a multifaceted operation where you'll be able to descend on these 4 at the same time to reduce this possibility of collateral damage. And I want to buttress the fact that if we don't do this, the incentive for these groups to continue will go. Perhaps in the course of our conversation, we can speak about what criminology says can be done when in these circumstances.
Absolutely, because that's the next point for us to get into as it is. If we know where they are and we have the technology and we are still finding it challenging over the years. I mean, kidnapping did not just start today. Over the years, we have seen this business, so to speak, thrive. How is it that we have not been able to build on our approach towards addressing it at the root? And we're still finding ourselves dealing with this very humongous problem.
Yeah, a couple of areas, and I would principally call on the National Assembly, the various committees that have responsibility for security. I think it will be very important that in their oversight functions, in the legislation, especially for the budget, they really do what we Nigerians voted them to do. They need to hold the security departments that are all in the executive arm of government to account. Whenever budgets are presented, monies are provided for the acquisition of tracking devices. Monies are provided for intelligence gathering. And yet, I think everybody will agree with me when I say we're not seeing the purposes for which these monies are being provided. So the legislature needs to wake up and start its oversight functions in a manner that ensures this. The second element is we need to build resilience within our communities. Our communities need to understand what kidnap for ransom is. Our communities need to understand how to approach kidnap for ransom. There are 3 elements involved in kidnap for ransom. Number 1 is the proceeds, ransom itself. Anyone who goes into kidnap for ransom, as long as it's kidnap for ransom, there are other types of kidnapping. Why he or she goes into it is to collect that ransom. So it gives you, if you are in law enforcement or in security, an advantage, knowing very well that that is his reason. I will shock you today to tell you that in almost all the cases that my company has been involved in, the monies are collected through our banking system. I say this with all sense of responsibility. In almost all, it's very few that cash is collected and taken to these guys. They are so brazen and bold that they provide account numbers Two banks are guilty, and because this is a public forum, I'm not going to mention the name of the bank. But of course, if the security agencies are interested and they listen to this, I'm happy to provide it to them. That's if they don't already know. So that means even our financial regulators have a responsibility to play, to ensure that banks play the KYC element very well. If they play that KYC element very well, it will be very easy, for instance, to descend on those account numbers and, of course, arrest whoever is the holder of that account. But as of today, that's not been done. So that's number one, the ransom issue. There are several other components under that perhaps maybe later we can discuss. The second one is the incentive that makes these groups. At the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned two groups. We need to launch a sociological investigation. The Office of the National Security Advisor needs to launch a sociological investigation to identify the incentive why these two groups are engaging in kidnap for ransom. I like giving this example. Someone, for instance, who spends 20 years of his life in a particular profession, perhaps at the end of that 20 years, all he has to show is, let's say, 2 million naira. Someone who goes into kidnap for ransom and then collects 60 million and then divides it, let's say, among 10 of them, each of them is waking up with 6 million naira in a space of 2 weeks. Now, that person who sees that, especially if the law does not descend on them and prosecute them, youths will wake up and think kidnap for ransom is lucrative, and that's why we have an industry today of kidnap for ransom. The last part is the law enforcement component. In criminology, once you isolate ransom, you isolate the perpetrator, then of course you look at the victim himself. What is the victim doing to reduce his vulnerability or her vulnerability? And that is where our law enforcement agents, our security agencies need to play a role in building our resilience as a society. What are those elements of physical security that would help us in reducing our vulnerability as individuals, as communities, then as corporate societies? Now, this is me breaking it down to the simplest form that I can break it down possible. If we go to discuss it from an expert point of view, there will be other elements to discuss, but I think anyone who listens to this understands that at least these three elements, if we do it, would go a long way. Don't forget that we've attempted the legislation angle, where at the federal level, we even attempted to ban or make it illegal, the payment of ransom. At the state level, subnational level, some of them made, the involvement of, kidnap for ransom. There was a death penalty, as it were, placed on it. But it hasn't helped for the simple reason that we didn't approach it using these three elements that I talked about.
Yeah, you've actually, touched on so many things, because I was also going to say that Nigeria's Terrorism Prevention Act, forbids Nigerians from, paying ransom. But then they usually go that way because of the unavailability of, rescue operations and all of that. But I want you to expatiate on the, what criminologists, say, can be done, to stem the tide of insecurity, especially what we are recording, across the country, especially the FCT as we speak. The president also said that he is committed to fighting insecurity, to investing more in insecurity, in prosecuting the war against insecurity, and then he's also proposing forest rangers. And I'm wondering what they can do in this regard in helping to complement military's efforts against these criminals.
Yes, so there are several elements that are contained within the Renewed Hope agenda that, if implemented, I think it would really help reduce several types of criminal activities within the country, including kidnap for ransom. With regards to your question, using the FCT as an example, every good security management, whether at the individual level, at the corporate level, at the community level, or in this instance at the level of somewhere as large as the Federal Capital Territory with its 6 council areas, has to have 6 elements. The element to deter a threat, the element to deny, delay. Those 3 elements can be grouped together and we can call them the preventive elements. In other words, and under all of these 3 elements, there are different components. So if we pick deter, at the beginning of our conversation, I told you there are mountainous, areas and forested parts of the FCT. So how do you use the 3 elements of security: people, technology, and systems, This is the public forum, so I'm also careful how much I reveal. The bad guys are also listening. But when you use these three things and then look at this ability to deter, how do you make sure using them, combining them? Under this, as an example, may include using technology to detect when there is a movement, and then, of course, the response capability to go and detect. And which brings me to the next three sets, which is response. There are 6 council areas in the FCT Abuja. How many of those council areas even have telephone numbers that residents can quickly call? I know the FCT Police Command tries, but believe me, I engage with the community, so I know that most of these communities don't even have these telephone numbers to make calls. And then even when they have the telephone numbers, because of the team deployment of security forces within those council areas, the farther you go outside the municipal council, the thinner you see security presence. So that fourth element, which is the response element, is not effective, unfortunately. In security management, response should be between 2 to 7 minutes. In other words, anywhere within the SVT that there is an incident or crisis, the security forces should be able to respond within 2 to 7 minutes. And you will agree with me. In fact, you can do a simulation. You are a journalist. Go to, let's say, Kuje, or go to Kwali, and then try to call any of the security agencies and see how long it will take them before they come to your rescue, even in the daytime. And then imagine if it was at the nighttime. The fifth element is the element to review. And these 3 last elements I'm talking are usually reactive. The first 3 that I've mentioned are preventative. These other ones are reactive. That's after the incident. So you should, every good security management system should have that capability to review. And then, of course, the last one is the capability to recover. In other words, when you review, you identify your strengths, you identify your weaknesses, what did you do well, what didn't you do well, and then in the last one, which is the recover element, you implement those good things. So this is how good security management strategies are implemented. And I can tell you, if we conduct an audit today, and I'm pleading with the president to direct that an audit of the FCT security management be done, I will be happy to support that. Either the minister can do it himself, but if he doesn't, the president can direct that, because the FCT is too important really to allow what is happening at the moment. If we conduct a security audit of the FCT using the 6 elements that I've mentioned, we'll be able to identify the gaps, and we'll be able to identify measures, including, for instance, building resilience and collaborative effort. Our traditional rulers at the 6 council areas, we cannot neglect them. And then, of course, thought leaders, including religious clerics, and several other leaders need to be incorporated so that the resilience of the population in itself presents a challenge to these bad guys. If you build that resilience and the deterrence element within the security management system is strengthened, then it would be very difficult for them to continue to operate with the impunity that they are operating at the moment. I've said a lot, but I've tried to summarize it.
I just want you to quickly touch on the implication of this whole matter, especially on the FCT and perhaps other states, if we don't address it, nip it in the bud.
The social contract is being depleted, as it were. The social contract is an agreement between government and the people, where we have let go of certain of our rights to the government with the hope that the government will protect us. So the more this ability of government to protect us is now being diminished by the activities of these groups, these 2 that I've mentioned, the more people will distrust the government. And at the center of that, unfortunately, is our very collective agreement to live together as a people and be organized in the democratic setting that we are. So that, I think, is the number 1 element. And the implication of that is that people would seek to arm themselves, as we are seeing already. There is no community that you go to that you don't see one or the other form of vigilantes and other protective measures that they are putting in place. It is a danger in itself, because it means more weapons are, coming into the country, and those weapons, unfortunately, would be used for purposes that we all don't want. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the quality of life is being diminished in Nigeria. We all are humans, because in natural sense, we want an improvement in our quality of life. If a family goes to bed and then at 2 a.m., you gave the example of the incident in Buari where a family of, I think, 7 were abducted. But at the same time, another family in Zamfara that were abducted, they are still in the hands of those abductors. Just yesterday, almost about 40 persons were abducted in Zamfara, somewhere in Karanamuda local government. Before then, students were abducted about 4 months ago. All of these are people who came out and were looking or were hoping to improve their lives. Now today, they are still in the hands of those bandits. In the presentation of my organization that we did for December, we've shown that in 2023, over 4,000 Nigerians have been abducted. Now, all of these are mothers, fathers, sisters. The livelihood that have been affected, that have been disrupted. If you go to the villages, people sell their properties. Women who, the little jewelries that they had when they were married and that they've kept, lands that families kept, they wanted to use it to improve their lives, have been sold to pay ransom to these bad guys. So the quality of life, unfortunately, is mirrored with that. Number 2. Number 3 is the economy itself. If you look at food security is being affected negatively by the continuation of this abduction. Farmers are not able to go to their market, where they're able to go to the farms to farm. Even when it comes to harvesting, it's difficult for them. So especially if you look at the areas where agriculture is thriving in the country, areas like Benue, Kaduna, Zamfara, Niger, all North Central and Northwestern Nigeria, and to an extent some parts of Southwest Nigeria, they are adversely affected by this. So it's going to affect food security. I know the president has constituted a committee, and I'm very happy that he actually put food security in the purview of the National Security Council. But the challenge is that the National Security Council has not started for quite a while now. So we don't even know what this committee that the president has set on food security, which is in the purview of the National Security Council, is doing. So again, we need to wake up there. These elements would have to be. And then I also, at the beginning, I talked about foreign direct investment. Nobody is going to come and invest in Nigeria with this. Well, I wouldn't say nobody. If anyone who decides to invest will have to have a provision for security. When Julius Berger said he should be paid about 1.3 trillion for the completion of the Abuja route, a significant portion of that is going to the provision of security. So projects that ordinarily would be done at a low cost would be done at a very high cost. Now that is how there are so many other things that I can talk about, but unfortunately, the simple, I think, conclusion is that it's not going to help our country. It's affecting us adversely, and we need to reverse it as quickly as possible. I said at the beginning that I'm hoping that the president direct an audit, if it or the minister himself will do that, and I'll be happy to support that.
All right, we'll have to leave this conversation here now. Security consultant, managing director, Beacon Consulting Limited, Kabir Adamu, thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Now, President Bola Tinubu's decision to suspend all